In preparation for this very video, Iceman vs. Iron Man, I was asking a bunch of people how they viewed this topic. And yet it's an overwhelming amount of people who were saying that Iceman would win, and that it was so one-sided that it shouldn't even be a topic. And yet, that's exactly what Eric's and I were planning on doing for this entire series. It's to show that it's not as one-sided as people might originally believe. So let's just address the biggest elephant in the room, which is the absolute zero topic. So Iron Man, as you can see from these three instances, has resisted absolute zero before, and in fact has built a resistance to them specifically because of the Mandarin. So will it affect him? Sure, but will it freeze him instantly and make it so that he can't escape or do anything about it? No, not by a long shot. Another thing that I also think is important to point out is that absolute zero would help Tony charge his battery, because we see from this panel that Tony has the ability to use his thermal couplings to charge his batteries from both hot and cold. And then as for why ice wouldn't be that big of a problem for Tony, we've seen Tony continuously break out of ice even in his oldest suits, which means that freezing Tony and putting him in ice isn't really going to be a win condition for Iceman. Also, continuing to put this into perspective for why this isn't a win condition for Iceman, Tony at about 73% of his battery was able to produce about 10,000 degrees Kelvin, which is hotter than the surface of the sun. And this is only at 73%, and we know that Tony can supercharge his battery, so he can increase his battery percentage by over 100%, which means that he would be producing well over 10,000 degrees Kelvin. As for another win condition that's pretty popular for people to bring up for Iceman is him reforming inside of people. I don't actually think this would matter too much, because Tony has his suits read his DNA to differentiate between him and other people inside of his suit. This essentially means that if Iceman were to reform inside of Tony, even if Tony's body might die, the suit could then implement countermeasures, i.e. capturing him and forcing him into a stasis within the suit, or putting him inside of an energy field to keep his physical body in there. And for anyone who thinks that Tony's AI isn't smart enough to come up with these, or creative enough to come up with these, I would encourage you to reread, because Iron Man's AI, at least currently, is 100% based off of his own personality and IQ, and is meant to replicate him because he understands that he's the weakest part of the Iron Man suit. And as for one last win condition, if all of these other ones fail, Tony can easily do something similar to what Mystique did when Mystique used a neural inhibitor to prevent Bobby from going into his ice form via the nanites that were able to take away the likes of Captain Marvel, Spider-Man, and Sentry's powers.